everyone, welcome back to another episode of Lively Rooted, the podcast. This is going to be, I feel like, kind of just a little bit on the triggering side of an episode, especially for the moms out there. And of course, I never mean any harm, but just offer a very different perspective here. Some of you may agree with me on the topic that will be for today's episode. Some of you may be like, you are nuts, and kind of go into full-on defense mode. And if that is the case, I just invite you to ask yourself why you would feel that you need to be on the defense mode going throughout the topics within this episode. And so if you've read the title, The Symptom is the Signal, we're going to get into the mother's nervous system and how that impacts your baby, your children, the rest of the house, the family dynamic, but also kind of diving into why children might have symptoms. And so if you have been following me on social media, you'll know that I've said this before too, that symptoms shouldn't be looked at as the way that we look at it in allopathic medicine, which is a negative. Of course, symptoms might be negative. We don't want to have different symptoms, but symptoms are a way of the body communicating with you. Similar like when we get our period every month, right? When we get our period, that is like our report card for the month. It can show us if we are clotting, that can be a sign of excess estrogen. That might be a liver issue. Lack of bioavailable nutrients, maybe too much copper. If we are having painful periods, that can also be a symptom, PMDD symptoms, right? So this is the body's way of telling you and kind of giving you a little check-in, right? Similar with our kids, especially if our kids are not able to speak and to communicate to us through words, their body is going to communicate to us through their symptoms. If they are breastfeeding, this could also look like latching issues, tongue ties. That is a whole episode to go down the science of tongue ties and the industry behind that and the releasing. But different things like that. The child's symptom can potentially also stem from a dysregulated nervous system in their mother or their caregiver. And so starting out with behavioral issues, for example, behavioral issues in kids are the most common issues that I see as to why parents come to me to do hair analysis testing, stool testing, to get to the root of these behavioral issues, right? So they are messages from the body. If we suppress them, if we were to give a child who was recently diagnosed with ADHD, if we were to give that child Adderall or Vyvanse, that is essentially suppressing the communication that the child is attempting to give their caregiver or their mother. And so my approach with this is very different. It is to listen, to assess, to investigate, and get to the root cause of why this is happening. This looks like hair analysis testing. If you've been listening to me before, you know that this is always a test that I first start with everybody. And in some cases, depending on how old the child is as well, I will tell mom that she needs to get her hair test done and that the child needs to wait. And this can kind of come as a shock to some people because they will say, well, why? My child has a symptom. I don't. Very defensive sometimes. And the reason is because kids from the ages 0 to 8 years old will follow the mother's nervous system. So if mom is dysregulated, everybody else is dysregulated, and the baby will be dysregulated, toddler, however old, up until usually about 8 years of age, the child will be dysregulated as well. And so sometimes we kind of go in with looking at symptoms from a kid with blinders on, and oftentimes I have seen this, and it's a very unfortunate situation where there is abuse happening in the household, whether it be from the parents or whether it be from siblings or even bullying at school. But I guess mostly for the sake of this conversation, abuse happening within the house, where if somebody is defensive, I don't want to use the word hesitant because hesitant is kind of different in this situation, but if somebody is very defensive about not wanting to fix themselves or do the work within themselves, and just want to put the blame on the child, that is a sign that somebody's metabolism is very undernourished. And so the reason being is because when we have a healthy metabolism, when the body is nourished, when we are getting all of our nutrients in, when we are eating enough, a lot of people are not eating enough. A lot of people are not eating the proper macros for their body or the state of their nervous system, metabolism, stress response, whatever the case may be. We can very clearly see that on the hair test as well. When this happens, these types of people will tend to put the blame on everybody else but themselves, because how could it possibly be them? They don't do anything wrong. And this isn't me attacking. This is not me coming at people. This is just me explaining this from my point of view, working with these people, interacting with people, as a practitioner from what I have seen firsthand. And so I'm going to circle back to this, but symptoms are the signals. Symptoms do not equal a diagnosis in every case. I think that offering a diagnosis can sometimes be more harmful to a child or to an individual than it can be helpful. And this isn't true for every single thing out there, right? So, for example, when I was diagnosed with celiac when I was 12, that was a helpful diagnosis because we finally narrowed down why I was having cystic acne breakouts, rashes, hives, eczema, psoriasis, why my hair was falling out, why I looked like I had no life, no vitality in me, why I was constantly getting sunburnt, why my stomach and GI issues would ramp up. So it was helpful in that sense because it led us to a direction of, okay, we have this, now I can do this. Now I have to eat gluten-free and I feel better, right? Lots of gut work to do as well, that nobody will tell you about if you are diagnosed with celiac. But besides the point here, when I was diagnosed with PMDD at 19 and endometriosis at 18, those were very negative diagnoses to me. And it was nothing like my celiac diagnosis because from every doctor, gynecologist, OB specialist that I was seeing, multiple a month, they all told me the same thing, was that there was never anything that I could do. And I was basically going to either have to get pregnant, yes, at 19 years old, and live with this for the rest of my life, that every month was always going to be painful. Now, I did not just have pain around my cycle or when I was bleeding, I guess I should say. I had pain all throughout the month. So that was not a helpful diagnosis for me in particular, because I kept telling myself, I'm never going to get better. I have endometriosis. I'm never going to get better. I have PMDD. PMDD ruins my relationships. I'm never going to be able to have a healthy partnership, healthy relationship, romantic relationship because of my PMDD, because of my mood swings. I am never going to be able to do fun things in my luteal phase because of my pain, because I have endometriosis. It was very much centered around, I have this, so I can't this. I have this, so I'm always going to feel like this. That's not helpful. And that is, if we can put the pieces of the puzzle together, what a lot of people, without knowingly, they don't realize what they're doing it. Doctors, providers, specialists don't realize what they're doing it, or some of them do. It is the Rockefeller approach, right? To keep patients returning. If you have a sick patient, you have a reoccurring patient, you always have money coming through the door, versus a healed patient does not bring you money anymore. And so what this led to for me was a constant chronic state of self-devaluation and putting myself down, and more negative thought patterns that I had to detach from. And not just that, I had to detach from the label of endometriosis and PMDD and do a lot of inner work and a lot of prayer that I am not endometriosis. God never said, KP, you are endometriosis. He never said you are PMDD. And so that's where a lot of the times that I see diagnosis sometimes not being helpful, especially for kids. If we take a child to the doctor's office and now there's this negative idea or negative vibe, right, around what this child has ADHD, they need medication. What does that do to a child? I remember growing up with kids who got an ADHD diagnosis and their parents decided to put them on medication, and they would say all the time, like, I feel like I'm worthless. I feel like I am like a burden to my parents and a burden to my teachers because I can't sit still and I don't want to sit in a table all day and I don't want to be inside all day and I don't, and so it comes a very negative case for some people to have a diagnosis. I was on a follow-up call with a client the other day who was saying that her OCD diagnosis didn't really bring that much relief to her because deep down she knew she wasn't OCD. She is a child of God. God created her as her. God didn't create her with OCD, right? Or the label of OCD, I guess I should say, but that's something that she's currently struggling with, is detaching from OCD. And what therapists say might not be always what is accurate for us. And so labeling anybody, or especially a child with ADHD or anxiety, might not be the whole story. And it might be a helpful label because we know that these symptoms are showing us that it is this potential outcome or this potential diagnosis, if you want to call it that. But it doesn't stop there. For a lot of kids and for a lot of adults, it doesn't stop there. It goes a little bit further. Well, what is causing the anxiety? What is causing the ADHD? Symptoms are signals, remember. So in terms of mineral imbalances, hyperactivity, it could be copper toxicity. It could be high sodium. It could be low cellular magnesium. Tantrums are different than meltdowns, but tantrums could be, and even meltdowns in this aspect could be blood sugar crashes. It could be adrenal dysregulation. It could be trauma that mom had during labor and delivery. Shyness could be a calcium imbalance, low potassium, a nervous system dysregulation state. And so understanding that the way that our children are communicating with us are through these symptoms, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to get a diagnosis to feel better. Now, for some people, they need a diagnosis. They need a diagnosis to feel better and then to figure out what's wrong from there. For most practitioners like myself, I don't particularly need somebody who is struggling with symptoms to go to their primary or to a therapist and get a diagnosis and then come back to me. We can figure out what's going on without a diagnosis, because at the end of the day, you are you and you are not whatever you are diagnosed with. And so this is not me trying to steer somebody away from getting a diagnosis. Always use your intuition. If you feel like that is what you need to do for your family, for yourself, by all means, you are in control of your own body. But I'm saying for a lot of people, sometimes diagnoses bring on more weight than support. And so behavior issues, rage, anxiety, hyperactivity, I kind of touched on some mineral imbalances there. I created what I like to call the regulation ladder. And so it's kind of like climbing up this ladder to get to the ventral vagal state, which is safety, social engagement, having a balanced mineral system, balanced sodium and potassium. Dorsal vagal is your shutdown, your freeze state. So this is typically a calcium shell, but not always. Low sodium and potassium, maybe an inversion ratio. So high potassium over sodium. Sympathetic is that fight or flight. So this is usually where copper is either dumping or copper is present, copper toxicity. Low magnesium, high sodium with that inflammation. These people can be very type A, very addicted to stress. And so in terms of a mother's nervous system, so we can have different survival responses, right? Fight, flight, freeze, and then fawn and foe are kind of two newer ones. Usually we only hear about fight, flight, freeze. But in terms of mother's nervous system here, baby is going to follow the state of mom's nervous system. If mom is dysregulated, then baby is going to be dysregulated and symptoms are going to arise. And so something that's really interesting here that I've kind of been thinking more about, and I've had this on my I can't remember if I ever did send out an email newsletter on this topic. If I didn't, it was always in my drafts to send out. I just kind of wanted to get a little bit more kind of studies done to be able to actually link different attachment theories to various mineral imbalances, even gut health as well, but I see it mostly with mineral imbalances. And if you aren't familiar with the attachment theory, it's basically you have an attachment theory, whether it is avoidant, secure, anxious, disoriented or disorganized is one of them as well. And this tells a lot about how you interact in relationships, not just romantic relationships, but partnerships, friendships, things like that. And so you can take the quiz to figure out what attachment style you have. I am an anxious, just so that everybody can know, maybe you can relate. But your attachment style is pretty much formed during your very early developmental years because it is the energy and the, not just the energy, but the attention that your caregivers give to you during those very early developmental years as a child. So from 0 to 3 years old. Now, your home life definitely matters. If you had a mother that let you cry it out, that is going to impact your attachment style because you as a baby were told that you or were shown that you didn't have anybody to depend on because you were left to cry it out. Just one example, right? There's hundreds of examples, but just one example. In the sense of how this impacts before I get there, let me say this. There have been multiple studies that I can link in the show notes that have found the older generation, so back in the early 90s, most people had secure attachment styles. And that makes sense, right? In the early 90s or even in the mid 90s, that makes sense. And even if there was studies, which I don't know off the top of my head and I have to do some digging, but in the 1800s, right? Because women were home, they were with their children, men were working, or as soon as men started going off to, as soon as we had war, men had to leave on deployment for war. That's when we know that women had to start working. Women had to kind of take on the role of being a mother and being a father and going to work and providing for their family, not just in the home sense, but now for a financial role as well. And so throughout the years, we've been able to, studies have shown that attachment styles have actually changed. So a lot of people have gone from being secure attachment styles into more anxious and avoidant. And now the general population is less and less of a secure attachment and more of those anxious and avoidant attachment styles. And so it kind of makes sense piecing the puzzles together, right? If we're kind of looking throughout history, what home life was like. And then, of course, we had the women's rights movement. Women wanted to be able to vote. They wanted to go to work. They wanted to do everything that a man could do. They wanted equality. And women started to not be home as much. And now, in modern time now, daycares are very present. This is where some of you are probably going to get very defensive, and I don't mean harm, just a different perspective, like I said at the beginning. But now more and more children are going into daycares. Their caregivers are potentially fluctuating. They are not seeing their mother as much as they should be during those crucial developmental years. Remember, 0 to 3 years old. And this is greatly impacting them because they don't have one nervous system to follow, right? And even the nervous system that they have to follow, which is mom's, if mom is not home and if mom is dropping them off at daycare and she is choosing to go to work. And I talk about this in the sense of women that have the choice to go back to work. There are a lot of women that do not have a choice. They have to go back to work to help financially. Studies have shown that those women tend to be very resentful of their husbands because of that. But also, women that do not have to go back to work, if they have the privilege of staying at home with their children, those women tend to be more avoidant, and those women tend to have elevated levels of copper, low levels of calcium and magnesium, sometimes a calcium shell, and an elevated sodium and potassium ratio. Because again, sometimes type A, they thrive in that fight or flight mode because they never had safety and stability, and they never had a secure attachment growing up. And so this is where that generational trauma can get passed, right? Because we are now giving our children what we got or what we didn't get, and we are following the same patterns that our mothers did to us, knowingly or unknowingly. And until we are consciously aware of that and break those patterns and do the inner work, those generational traumas or curses, some people like to call them, are going to continue on for years and years and years and get passed on and on and on. And so we're finding a lot more, or I guess researchers are finding a lot more of Gen Z, which I am Gen Z, the Zoomers, and then we have Gen A, Gen Alpha, which is after me, so everyone who is being born, today, Gen Alpha. Those kids are becoming more anxious and avoidantly attached because they don't have mothers their mothers might have been narcissistic growing up. So now they are going to parent in an unconscious way or a subconscious way that same pattern, right? Some of them aren't doing the work. They haven't brought it to the forefront of their mind that, wait a minute, I don't think that I want to treat my child like this. I don't think that I want to make my child feel like they don't have anybody to depend on, because maybe they didn't have anybody to depend on in early developmental years as well, as an adolescent or a teenager or even a young adult. And so everything that we are doing now and in early childhood, remember 0 to 3 years old, is going to impact that child later on in life, especially if we have mineral imbalances that are present too. It takes a lot of inner work to heal an anxious attachment or an avoidant attachment. And it takes a lot of time to nourish the body and give back the body what it needs. Because when you think about somebody who, and I can speak for myself when I say this, as somebody who, because of who I am with now, I have moved into more of a secure attachment. We both have. And it took a lot of work to get there. But I can tell you from years throughout college, before I met who I was with now, the anxious attachment style. And if I had known about mineral balancing years ago, it would be interesting to see on paper how the minerals would have changed and how those different mineral patterns would have changed throughout different cycles of things like that. But when you are under stress, you burn through calming minerals, and the stimulating minerals are increasing, because that is putting your body in fight or flight. You're either going to run from the stressor or you are going to fight it, which is why we see mostly elevated sodium, elevated copper, sometimes elevated phosphorus, low lithium, things like that. Maybe even heavy metals are starting to get pushed out at this time too, the body's wanting to excrete them. All of this has an impact on the nervous system and also the attachment style of an individual. And so again, child, baby will follow. This is why using the hair test is really crucial here, because if you are somebody that you know you are struggling with an attachment style, you know you're struggling with a dysregulated nervous system, and your child is following, maybe you're starting to kind of piece those things together. It's not always just on the child to fix their mineral imbalances. And I can give you a case study, an example right now. So I was working with a 5-year-old, and they had sleep problems. Mom wasn't sure why. And so I was like, okay, well, let's do their hair test. And let's kind of see, what's going on inside their body. Low levels of calcium, copper toxicity. Mom did have a stressful labor and delivery. Postpartum was okay for her. Just felt kind of very alone. Postpartum depression, though. Little postpartum anxiety, not terrible, but we created a protocol. We focused really on whole foods for her and for her child, and nothing was really working. We had done a retest, and the body was responding to the foods really well, and a couple of supplements that we had thrown in just for some extra support there to support her nervous system. But on paper, she looked good, but in reality, and this is why it's really important that you find somebody who does work a lot with the nervous system and emotions, because a practitioner especially, we can't just go off of results in a piece of paper. I have seen people's hair tests be on like a third or fourth retest look insane. And they're like, I feel great. I feel the best I've ever felt. Thank you so much for helping me. And I'm like, really? Because your hair test is kind of, so we can't always just go. And a lot of that is establishing trust with your client as well too. For other practitioners out there, just a little bit of advice, just from stuff that I found helpful, because sometimes people don't want to open up and tell you what they are struggling with. You're kind of like an onion peeling back the layers, right? But back to this case study. I was on a call with mom, and I kind of started to have to ask a little bit more deeper questions, because I was like, okay, well, we're doing all the things right. Then I'm suspecting, is it mold? And then she started saying how she has felt a little bit more off, how she feels more internally guilty, and kind of has like an internal, almost kind of like power struggle that she was dealing with between her and her husband, because she kind of wanted to go back to work and show that she could be the mom that does it all. And mind you, she did not have to work. They financially were very blessed. Her husband has a very great job. She did not have to go back to work. And in fact, he wanted her to stay at home with their daughter. They wanted to have more kids eventually. And she insisted, nope, I want to go back to work. And I was like, well, how would you feel about doing your hair test? How would you feel about getting a minerals test done for you? And she's like, but my child is the one that has most of the symptoms, right? But something is going on as to when she's at school and she's not seeing you a lot. And so this is where is kind of, as a practitioner, and I know my other practitioner friends get so excited with stuff like this, because it's like we're kind of having this full circle moment here, where when they go to school or they're in daycare, and she's not sleeping, right? She's waking up in the middle of the night. She's going into mom's room. She's wanting to play with mom. She's wanting to just like kind of, talk about her day and, talk about things and just be a typical 5-year-old kid, right? And mom was like, I have to go to bed. Like, I don't have time to be up late. I have work the next day. And that's where this nervous system dysregulated state was coming from, was the attachment theory almost kind of coming into play here. Mom had a very high sodium potassium ratio, which made sense. And we had to do a lot of kind of like peeling back the onion layer here, like I like to call it, and really getting vulnerable with each other, that it's okay that this is coming up for your child. It's okay that all these emotions are coming up for you, and you don't have to be the mom that feels like she has to do everything. Like I said closer to the beginning of this episode, if you are financially capable of staying home with your child, stay home with your child, because they need that from you. They need to see you, to hear you, to sense you, to smell you. They need that from, and I've said 0 to 3 years old, but obviously longer if you can. And so she was sent to daycare when she was younger. And that was something that was having an impact on her sleep because mom wasn't home. She wasn't home. She wasn't home with mom. She didn't spend that much time with mom other than first thing in the morning and when she was picked up from daycare. And so that's where the sleep issues came into play. Because when we're doing all of the right work, nutritionally, movement-wise, hydration-wise, if we're living a non-toxic lifestyle, if we've ditched perfume and the toxic deodorant and all these things, we have to go to the next step. And where I feel like a lot of practitioners kind of say, well, there's nothing else I can do for you, we have to dig into the deeper parts of the nervous system, and we have to dig into what the body is trying to say and express emotionally. And it's almost kind of like your child's body is really smart, just as your body is really smart, but do you trust it? Do you trust your body? Do you trust your child's body? And this is when symptoms can kind of come in as those survival mechanisms too, or not even a survival mechanism, but in this case, a way of the child's body trying to communicate, like, I need more of my mom. I need more time with my mom. And so this is when kind of to tie in what I said earlier about a diagnosis, suppression of symptoms can backfire as well. And so if she were to have given her, which she almost started giving melatonin, and then she kind of was like, something doesn't feel right. She was definitely intuitively aware about giving melatonin, which I'm so happy about. I don't recommend melatonin for kids. And I have, I think, a highlight saved on that or an Instagram post saved on that for my reasons why. And I can do an episode if people are interested, maybe like a deeper episode of melatonin for kids on the podcast. But medications, or melatonin in this case, could have created more hormonal chaos for her little body by the time she hit puberty, in her teens, in her young adult life, because we are now messing with the hormones. Melatonin is a hormone. Remember that. So this is when, if we are suppressing symptoms, we don't want to suppress. We want to allow the body to heal. We want to give the body what it needs to heal and to kind of, again, have like that full circle moment of healing. And so, mineral imbalances, emotional triggers, emotional trauma, stressors. German New Medicine is something that I really like looking into here for any possible emotional triggers. So like I said, if we have done a lot of the work, if the client is following their protocol, they are getting in the nutrition requirements that they need, they're eating the right macros, they are eating enough calories, if they are hydrating, if they are getting in electrolytes, if they are doing all of the things, there is something lingering, and I promise you, more often than not, it is an emotional issue. And a lot of people, we don't want to recognize the emotions because we don't want to do the emotional work because it is very hard and it is very triggering. And so for a lot of people, it's easier to just say, just give me X, Y, and Z supplement and tell me what to do X, Y, and Z here. I actually had a call probably like, what was it, a week or two ago? And somebody had asked me, you know, the most depleted people that I see tend to be the people that are very kind of almost like control freaks in a way with their nutrition, no processed food, no fast food, no sugar, no GMOs, no sodas, no alcohol. They are very on top of eating ancestrally or like an animal-based diet, no food dyes, and very, very much, like I said, kind of a control freak. And I feel those people are usually some of the ones that I see that are the most depleted. They're doing all the things right. They're drinking filtered water. They are using high quality salt. They are going to bed. They're waking up with the sun. They're balancing their blood sugar. They're wearing a continuous glucose monitor. And those people are more often than not where I see that they need a lot of emotional work. They need a lot of deep, deep, deep inner work, journaling, prayer, meditation, if that's their thing, and releasing those stored traumas, whether it's through somatic exercises or stretching or walking, right? So it's just very interesting. And again, why I try to explain to other people and other practitioners too, it's not just about the nutrition. It's not just about the water that we're drinking. What's your relationship like with God? What is your relationship like with yourself? What is your inner child doing? How are they feeling? What are they suppressing? What have you been told to suppress? Remember, we live in a society where it's very much like, you're not bleeding, you're fine. I grew up that way. I grew up like, you gotta cry, I'll give you something to cry about. And that's a very toxic way to think because especially as women, we store emotions. Men store emotions as well. But women store their emotions in their womb area, right? And so again, that generational trauma kind of gets passed on here. But this is where a lot of decoding kind of like the body and peeling back the layers of the body and diving really, really deep into those uncomfortable feelings that we have been suppressing for years, or things that we didn't even like realize. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with clients that we kind of peel back some things like, I didn't even think that it affected me at that age, but it is. It's affecting them in their adult life right now. It's affecting their kids. And so again, we live in that society where we're told not to feel. We are told not to let things affect us. Again, very masculine, very, very much masculine. And I think I talked about this in my previous episode, but very much a masculine society because go, high sodium, calcium, and less potassium, and a lot of these people are potassium deficient. They can't feel. Potassium is very fluid. It wants you to feel. It wants you to experience. And so when we don't have that, how are we supposed to help our nervous system? How are we supposed to help our attachment style for not just ourselves, but for our relationships if you're married, and then for your children to thrive as well, right? And where it all starts is nourishment at the cellular level through minerals. Mineral testing, like I said, is going to help decode the signal, map out behavior patterns, and just like I gave in that client study, kind of peel back those layers as to what is causing the sleep issues, what's causing the meltdowns. Is it truly because the child might be copper toxic, or is there a family dynamic that is going on that we haven't really addressed yet? And is mom willing to address that? So, your child is not broken. Please know that. Their symptom is the signal, and we just have to listen to it. If you like this episode, please make sure to leave me a 5-star review, either here on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you listen to them. I do have my biblical birth guide that is going to be released in September. I will link the pre-order link below in the show notes, but you can go check that out there. I will also link some ways that you can work with me. And if you have any questions, please reach out. If there are any episodes that you would like to see in particular, please let me know. I always want to make sure that I am creating the content that you guys are interested in. So please let me know, and I hope you have a blessed day.